Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the center of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm honored that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
In my previous agency land, that was the first piece of work that you did, is the customer insight piece of work. And then you moved on from there. That is the foundational core piece of everything. And people pay lip service to it. They do it in a brand campaign, or like I did, they do it at the beginning of this other stuff we're going to do over here. But they don't come back to this regularly enough. They do it and then they go, oh, that's really great. And then they file it away somewhere. They don't really get into the heart of truly understanding their customers' aspirations, their problems, the whole transformation piece of where they were before they joined your company or used your service to where they want to be.
Welcome back. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. If you haven't already listened to my recent conversations with sales and profit coach Fabian Patel and with improv master Peter Margaritis, then do check them out. Only after you've listened to today's conversation, of course. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Sarah McIntyre of Bright Inbound Marketing. Sarah creates marketing campaigns that work for her clients, and her philosophy is always on and always helping. She has a unique blend of marketing strategy and campaign execution skills and 20 years experience with both big corporate marketing teams and startups. She's also a Chief Marketing Officer for Hire, a new model she's testing now. In our discussion today, Sarah talked to me about why you should always be listening to and learning from your customers. We talked about how to systemise your customer insights gathering methods, and we talked about productising your service offerings. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Sarah McIntyre. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Sydney, Australia, Sarah McIntyre, who's the founder and chief strategist of Bright Inbound Marketing, and also recently is the head of marketing at MedAdvisor, which is a new role that I'm interested to learn more about as well. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah. We've had a couple of goes at this, and you've had building activity making a lot of noise outside your office area, and it didn't work out too well. It's a great privilege to speak to you again.
Yeah, it's very, thanks for having me here. I'm glad we got a chance to re-record it, and I'm sorry about, renovations that keep going on and on and on next door. So hopefully, cross fingers today, they won't be any more circular saws. We might get a leaf blower instead, maybe. That'd be good.
Well, I think given that we're kind of I think we're coming out of the lockdown situation from the pandemic where we both are, but we're still working from home. So people are a bit more forgiving certainly about kids running into the room and dogs barking in the background and those kind of things. So maybe we'll forgive a leaf blower as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's been interesting. People have realised that, one, they can work from home effectively, and two, everyone does have a life, and you shouldn't have to pick one or the other in your work environment. Bringing your whole self to work, whether it's kids and dogs and renovation projects next door. That is your life. So I see so many upsides from this whole lockdown process.
It has
really,
certainly forced us to
yeah.
reevaluate a lot of things, hasn't it? And it's, I mean, we were talking just before we started recording about the whole shift to working from home. And I mean, I've been working from home for probably 20 or so more years because I've had global roles that have required me to go on meetings and teleconference, video conferences in the middle of the night. And so then I didn't, if I had 2 a.m. in the morning finish, I wasn't going to front up to the office the next morning at 9. So I sort of slept in and did my work later in the
Yeah.
day again, because often there'd be another one of those sessions the next night.
Yeah.
So for me, the working from home thing is kind of second nature almost. But for a lot of people, they weren't familiar with it. They didn't see it as an option. And of course, now with the pandemic, they've been forced to do it and suddenly realized, hey, this is actually doable. And it might be an option even if we're not forced to.
Right, exactly. I think that's really interesting, because have similar experience to you, and I've worked from home for the last 10 years. And in my previous corporate role, I had a global role, so I had calls in the middle of the night or early in the morning. So yeah, I got used to working flexibly, and I think that's where COVID has forced organisations to really embrace flexible working, because they have no choice, and have realised that actually it's not something that's really difficult for people to do. If organisations could be more flexible, I think we could be more productive. We have more working hours in the day. We can spend some more time with our families. We don't have to commute, which takes up a lot of time for a lot of people. And you also open yourself up to a broader talent pool of people from potentially all over the world that you could recruit into your business, which is how the role that I'm currently in has come about, because it's a remote role. And they would never have considered a candidate in a different state unless this, the pandemic happened, and it became an option, really. And for me, it became an option too, because I was looking at ways that I can really help organisations to embrace the digital change and the change required to really uplift their marketing into a digital environment. And I've been doing this for clients for a number of years now, and have mostly worked as a consultant, somewhat embedded. But I'm now finding that this role and one just previously, when I was fully embedded into a company for at least 6 months, really helps fast track the change needed. The change in being customer centric, the change in getting new systems and processes in place and upskilling their team, and moving to a content led customer centric style of marketing is hard. And yeah, I think this is it's an interesting. I've kind of been calling myself a bit of a CMO for hire type of situation, where I could come in and bring my consultant hat and do a complete audit across the organisation and go, well, these are the observations I've seen in these critical areas, customer insights, tech stack, content creation, ongoing execution, not campaign style execution, ongoing execution, which is also a mandatory in a digital environment. These are the observations that I have. These are my recommendations, or the implications. These are the recommendations for implementing. How does this align with the organisational objectives? Okay, right, let's go down this path. So you have much more, I don't know, leeway, I guess, or much more authority to do so when you're a head of marketing, as opposed to being
I was just
an
going to say the authority is probably, you're in a different level of authority because you're part of the employees as opposed to an outsider, if you like.
Right. Yeah, and part of the executive leadership team. And I think that's really important too. You're privy to the leadership discussions. Your opinion is valued by the leadership team. Yeah, it's just a very different very different role that you play in an organization. Yes, you can have very trusted consultants, but ultimately they're still the consultant. That if someone disagrees with you, then they can just go, okay, we'll just get rid of them. So, you know what it's like. The agencies always get blamed for any of the problems, and then you go. So
all right. Well, how do you balance the the clients that you work with in your own agency, then how do you balance that work with the work you're doing as the chief marketing officer of Ed Advisor?
Yep. Yeah. So I've been spending also some time productising the service offering of the agency, and really refining it into a single type of work. I think when you first, well, particularly for me, when I first started an agency, you were trying to do all things. Building websites and creating campaigns and dabbling in Facebook ads and all the stuff. Blogging, SEO, all the pieces that you need to do an inbound marketing campaign. And I quickly realised I couldn't scale that or scale it in a profitable way. And also I didn't really enjoy all those pieces of it. So as an agency, I chose to focus and to be small rather than go big and scale and try and do everything. And the things that I love doing is the customer insight work. So I've spent a lot of time productizing the customer insight work, creating workbooks, creating things that I can do pieces of it and then hand off to others to do the rest of it. Train them how to do interviews, train them how to put a system in place around customer insights. Have a look at what's going on in the organisation and just put some boundaries around it. Really, so this, even if it's as simple as spreadsheets, to say, okay, these are the insights that we have. This is where it's coming from. This is the context. How do we share that? So I'm getting too down into the weeds of the product, but I have spent a lot of time productizing a service offering, so that it can be done by others and it can scale. So that's that's still kind of parked a bit for the moment. I haven't really gone out and sold it because I'm quite consumed with this other business, and I have scaled the business back, honestly. I have some freelancers that I work with and I kind of keep on hold, but I have scaled the business back while this other project is happening. And that's all happened while the pandemic was happening as well. So it made sense to me to kind of reposition the business. But I've also got this bubbling away in the background, this productized service offering, which I think is a really interesting thing for agencies to consider, because a lot of agencies are struggling with profitability and scale and trying to be all things to all people, and it doesn't work. You become a commodity, and you're not getting paid for your strategy work, which is what experienced marketers, this is what you're bringing to the table, is your knowledge and your strategy work, and most agencies don't get paid well enough for that. They get paid well enough for the things that they do, like, oh, we delivered X number of blog articles or whatever.
Right,
That's a commodity. You can go and get someone on Upwork to write blog articles. Don't know about the quality, but
exactly. Actually having a marketing campaign that works and implementing, as you say, the strategy that's going to give you results.
Yeah, but I think also, for an agency though, it's really rethinking their business models, because I don't see even the big agencies are struggling. Like there's, the big agencies are just they're constantly at the demand of big clients. If they lose a big client, they've got to lay off a whole bunch of staff. They pitch for these, they do enormously expensive pitching projects to win big chunks of business and give away strategy. It's like, why? And that's because that's the way it's always been done. But why? Why does that have to? The clients are getting a great deal. They're getting all these great strategic ideas, so not paying for them.
How did you go about the productization of your services? What some of the steps you took in that?
Well, I actually worked with a coach. I actually worked with another business to help me, because I had this idea and I didn't know whether it would be enough, particularly because it was just around, let's say it's about customer insights, and in my previous agency land, that was the first piece of work that you did, is the customer insight piece of work, and then you moved on from there and there. And I kind of thought, is that really going to be enough to build a whole agency around? But as I researched it some more, and as I work with him, I kind of went, well, yeah, it is. It's heaps, because that is the foundational core piece of everything. And people pay lip service to it. They do it in a brand campaign, or like I did, they do it at the beginning of this other stuff we're going to do over here, but they don't come back to this regularly enough. They do it and then they go, oh, that's really great, and then they file it away somewhere, or they still talk about it, but they talk about it kind of ephemerally, they don't really get into the heart of truly understanding their customers' aspirations, their problems, the whole transformation piece of where they were before they joined your company or used your service to where they want to be. That stuff doesn't get looked at enough. That's kind of become my passion now. And I work with a coach, and he's helped me put some structure around it and productize it and talk about it in a way that is like a product, not just one piece of a thing. When it is the foundational piece of everything, every marketing thing that you're going to do, even product. In this new company, the product development team is also super interested in this. Like, they're like, we have to do this, and we formed a really nice team. The marketing and product team are like, we've got to go and do this together, and pour over this customer data and do it in a intentional way. Like, we don't just want to send surveys out willy-nilly. We need to do this intentionally together, well thought through customer insight program, and keep learning from it. And the support team keep getting feedback from that, keep feeding that into this data. So it's a continually enriched pool of customer insight data. So I'm excited about building that. This is kind of like my test beta client for this product that I've got. So it's quite exciting.
I can hear the excitement in your voice, and I mean, certainly you're speaking to the you're speaking to the converted ear. I talk a lot about developing that empathetic understanding of your ideal client and what their before state looks like and what their after state looks like, their desired after state, and how do you fit into that picture, but really looking at it all through the customer journey and from the customer's point of view. And I like that you said, well, you don't just do that at the beginning and then, because it's a bit like the traditional business plan, isn't it? You work on it once a year and then put it in the drawer, and then a year later, it's time to do the business planning process again. And you say, now, where did I put that document from last year, and what did it actually say? So it's something that is a live document or live information, and you should be using it all the time and updating it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the change, I think, in the mindset of customer insights, is like taking it from a one and done thing to an ongoing integral part of your business. Like lots of businesses these days have chief customer officers. Lots of big businesses have that role. It's like, well, that's a really great way of thinking about it.
You say everybody.
It should be that. Even chief revenue officers probably should be chief customer officers. Really, you don't get revenue without customers.
The one I like is everybody in the organisation is a CEO, customer experience officer.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about putting that in place and seeing just what change it can drive for an organisation. I think it will be. So
your productized services, will they be like training programs with resources that people can learn how to do this themselves and have the resources then?
Possibly. I'm still thinking that it will be. I mean, not as completely embedded as I am right now, but probably might need to be a little bit. So, coming on board and walking people through the process of setting up a customer insight system, but then training them to do it themselves and enable themselves internally to have this system internally, so I can go, okay, great, and move on to the next project. Possibly down that line, it could be an online course or something like that. Okay. Maybe I don't know. I haven't really thought that bit through. I have dabbled in online courses and things, and there's, gazillions of them out there. whether they're useful as a lead generation funnel kind of situation into the bigger thing, possibly. I guess my aspirations for the company aren't to build a massive business. It's to build a small but mighty, really good one. I don't want to build a massive business with a big team. That's my personal goal, is not to do that. Sounds like weird, hey? But it will be productized in that there are steps to follow and there are workbooks that are already in place to lead you through the steps of the program, of gathering insights, analyzing them, and then deploying them. So I have got 3 phases of work. Whether that probably could translate to online, could translate into a book. There's lots of potential for it.
Tell us a little bit about your philosophy on customer insights. What are some of the kind of key fundamental pillars, if you like?
Well, I think it needs to be systematized. It needs to go beyond surveys. I think gathering qualitative data with actual interviews is probably one of the most important pieces of customer insights. But then also doing the analysis, and that takes an experienced head to really look at the analysis independently and make kind of make not subjective, but non-emotional decisions about the data. I think that can be skewed if you're looking at data and you're inside a company. Sometimes you can see what you want to see in the data. So that helps having an outsider to go, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't really tell that story. So being an impartial, I guess, analyst of the data is important. And then knowing where to deploy it or how to deploy it and prioritize it. So is this information, understanding the context that you got where you captured the information from, whether it was from a salesperson or a customer support call or from an in-depth interview, and then going, well, is this part of a bigger trend? Are we seeing the same thing happening over and over again? And what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to prioritize either fixing the problem, or is it a messaging problem that we need to fix? Where do we prioritize the deployment of that analysis? So there are 3 phases, gathering the data, analyzing it, and then deploying it, and then doing it again, keeping on doing it again. Yeah. So they're the three pillars.
And like you say, it's not linear. It's a kind of a circle, if you like, because as you gather data and analyze it and learn more, and then you deploy, or you take some actions from what you've learned, and I'm guessing that measuring the results of the outcomes of those actions is important there, and that gives you some more data that you learn some more, and then you go talk to some more people about new learnings, and so it's a constantly a merry-go-round, I'd like to say, but it's not a merry-go-round in the sense that you're on the spot. You're actually advancing your understanding quite dramatically and hopefully having a huge impact.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and you did raise a good point there about measurement, and it is a hard thing to measure, or to give a standard measurement. I think it's hard to say, well, how do we measure this? And I think it will be different for each company. I mean, Net Promoter Score is probably a good baseline for one. If you don't have any kind of measurement of customer success, you can measure customer satisfaction off the back of calls. I think Net Promoter Score is probably a good one to start with, to see who would refer you to others. Or are we able to tie it to an uplift in revenue? That's another interesting thing. You probably can, but for each organisation, that would be a different number. Is it increased number of subscribers, or is it increased engagement, or is it increased deal size? Or there's lots of different metrics that you can pick. I'd probably just pick a couple, like NPS and maybe one other to start with, see how it tracks from there. But yes, measurement is critically important. Everyone's got to prove Still got to prove the value of the work that we're doing above and beyond gathering really great data. If it doesn't really impact on the business bottom line, then there'll be questions.
Now, you talked about systems, having a system or having it systemised. So tell us a little bit about what specifically you mean there. Is that just a documented process here's how to go about it, or is it more than that?
Yeah, well, at this stage, it's just documenting the process. So it's shared spreadsheets and a shared wiki drive, and then documenting it, because what I found is that it doesn't get documented. You've got maybe a UX team who's and they're doing their own stuff over there, and then there's a marketing team over there who are doing their stuff, and then there's a product team who've got surveys and things, and there's customer support who's gathering customer data over here, but there's no one central repository of all that stuff. And that's by systemizing, I think, number one, let's just put everything in a central repository, and that can be as simple as a shared wiki or a shared folder, and then I've put some spreadsheets on top of that. So particularly when we're doing surveys out, touching the customers and asking them for things, you can't keep doing that every day or every week. There needs to be some kind of control over, okay, who's doing what, where, what's the intention behind this, what's the overall objective. Just putting some levels of control about how we gather insights, and then having the centralized database, or it's about a bunch of files at the moment. I mean, I think it'd be lovely one day to build a actual technology product on top of it. That might be an interesting business to do as well. And maybe there are solutions out there for it. I've seen solutions for gathering data. SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, or if you're going to get the top end of town, do that information gathering. But then the piece that happens next is that the analyzing and the systemizing of it. I don't know if there are any products that do that. So now it is spreadsheets and folders. not a fancy tech system, but
that's right,
better than nothing.
And as you pointed out, there's different departments are gathering different information. They might be surveying the same customers at the same time or at different times. The customer service department or the sales team would be talking to customers all the time and getting some insights from them, reporting back, hey, I've learnt this today in a conversation. Having that information in a central repository can be hugely valuable, just even without analysing, just sharing that concept.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a process thing. So we are also looking at putting together a customer committee that meets regularly. So there's a committee with representatives from sales, from customer support, from product, from marketing, from UX, who will all meet and have a look at the data and see what we've learned this month from customers, and if there's a broader overall trend, and if it correlates to what we learned last month, and if there should be something that gets bumped up in the priorities list from all of those divisions within an organisation. So I think that's a massive step forward. I know big companies have whole customer organisations, but for mid-sized companies, it's unusual, I think, for a mid-sized company to be thinking like that. But mid-sized companies have aspirations to be big companies, so let's put those foundations in place.
All right. Well, this is fascinating, Sarah. Now, we did talk at the beginning a little bit. I mean, before we started recording, we talked a lot more about this whole remote working thing. And one of the things that you mentioned to me was that this opportunity for you as a chief marketing officer for hire, if you like, with this one company came about because they're actually located in another state from you, and because we've all been forced to adopt remote working, they're now considering people that are not necessarily in their in their within commuting distance,
Yeah,
let's say, to the office now. So how do you see this whole
yeah.
remote working thing, even after the pandemic's over? Let's hope that's soon. Uh, how do you see this whole remote working thing and some of the other changes that have resulted there playing out in opportunities like this that might come about for people or for companies?
Mm, yeah. Well, I think for companies, it's really fast tracked the evolution to remote flexible working, and and for the most part, they've really embraced it. I know that this company I'm in, they've run some employee check-in surveys to see how everyone's dealing with the remote working, and overwhelmingly positive. People really enjoy working remotely. The other element is it opens up a whole world of
Mm.
recruiting possibilities. Your talent pool has got so much bigger because you're not restricted by geographical area. I mean, possibly restricted by time zones, but again, I think thinking about the world from a global perspective, and we're all connected with the pandemic, means you could potentially recruit someone, the best candidate you could possibly get, no matter where they are. So um, I think that's a huge leap forward, really. I've been working remotely for a long time, and working remotely with my clients for a long time. Uh, but it's been a slow uptake from the bigger organizations who really resisted it. And now I think that
Yeah.
myth's been busted. We can successfully remote work. We do need to sometimes be together, but for the most part, I have calls with my team just like this, and I can see them on the on video chat, and it's kind of even better because we see them at home. We see them with their cats and their favorite mug,
But
and it's just like,
they're
oh,
actually a person.
I'm my team. I haven't
Yeah.
actually met them in person, but I
Mm.
know a heck of about them already. So I think that's breaking down those walls a bit, and being yourself in a work environment,
Yeah.
not your work self, and you're being, you can't hide, you know,
Mm.
the crying children when you're on a leadership call and your kid's crying. It's like, oh, really sorry about that, but
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
life that we're
Yeah.
leading. So
And certainly with the pandemic and what it's forced upon us, everybody's a lot more tolerant of that. I guess thinking back 6 or 12 months ago, if a crying child would come into a meeting in a corporate boardroom and say, "Oh, mummy or daddy, I need some help," that certainly would be not acceptable. Whereas today
yeah,
because it's
exactly.
remote working and that everybody understands that the child's going to be at home because they're not allowed to go to school at the moment, and yeah, if they've got an issue, they're going to come running to mum or dad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, it is that level of understanding, but
Mm.
also an empathy of your fellow, your co-workers. But I still think at the same time, people are getting work done. I haven't seen any kind of drop in productivity levels. I think people are still
Mm.
getting the work done. In fact, I think I'm actually working longer hours because I'm not commuting and I'm not
Yeah.
wandering around, and I'm not, I'm sitting and working for longer hours.
Mm.
I've actually noticed that I need to go and
Mm.
move about a bit because I am sitting, and I think, yeah, I haven't seen any loss in productivity. I'd be interested to see the results of the survey that this company has done internally, but I think the team seems happy. I speak to them
Mm.
regularly like this. We're getting our work done. Everyone's
Yeah.
just cracking on.
And what you mentioned earlier about opening up the talent pool for companies as well, I think there's a couple of aspects to that. There's the geographical aspect, and there's also the aspect there's a whole lot of people that maybe stay-at-home parents, or people that
Mhm.
just want a part-time role, but now with this opportunity to work remotely, that part-time role could actually end up being 20 or 30 hours of work a week, which is almost like full-time, but they wouldn't be prepared to spend,
Exactly.
what might it be, 2 hours 4 days, so that's another 8 hours commuting. So that's always gone.
Exactly. Exactly. Particularly with stay-at-home parents and women getting back into the workforce, it's a massive challenge. Childcare is extraordinarily expensive, and 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 hard to come by, and not very nice. And sometimes it's nice to have the kids home. So being able to work flexibly is the reason that I started my business, because I had baby number two, and just I had a global job and it just didn't work. There's no way it could have worked. So that's the whole reason I started my business back in 2009. And so I think I don't want to say accommodating, because that's like we're making excuses or making room for, but now it's like flexible working is real, and can work, and you know what, there's such a huge talent pool of people who want to work flexibly, but organizations were resistant to that. And so I hope that's just blown that out of the water. There's actually a really cool company called Puffling, a lady, Leela, who started a few years ago, and it was about flexible working and placing females into flexible roles. Back at the same level, you have a lot of senior women who left, very capable, talented people who left to have children, who've really struggled with getting back. You've either got to get a nanny or pay for full-time childcare, or try and fit your work in around. It just was never a good solution. But who knows what's going to happen now? Huge talent pools available.
Yeah, I think flexible is the key thing here, and it opens up a lot of choices that perhaps people didn't look at before as an option. And now, because they've been forced to go into a remote working situation, it's all of a sudden, this could be an option for the future.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always was, and this is something I still am really keen to pursue in the right avenue, but in my corporate days, I always thought, because we're a global company, because we had people working in all around the world in different geographies and different time zones, I had this vision of doing research where, in one time zone, let's say in east coast of North America, people would work their 8 hours and do something and then hand it off to Europe, and they would take that work and continue it, and they'd hand it off into, say, India. That was the next time zone. They'd continue, they'd hand it off to Australia, say, and then they'd hand it off to the west coast of the US, and so on, so that you actually have this thing being developed and created 24 hours non-stop. And so therefore you compress the development cycle, so that, if it's possible to do it, you actually compress the time from idea to inception to product launch, if you like, by 3 or 4-fold.
So much potential. I used to do a similar thing, that I worked with some outsourced web developers that were based in the US for a long time. And it worked beautifully, because I would work my Australian working hours, and then at the end of the day, send them off the feedback. They'd work on it overnight, and when I woke up in the morning, there'd be updates. It's like, that's unheard of. That's gold to get that level of responsiveness, because they're on the other side of the world. So if you can get that time flow working, that can be tremendous.
All right. Well, this is fascinating, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing so much information with us, particularly on your new role and how that's opened up, and what that kind of looks like in terms of being the chief marketing officer for hire, if you like, within the company, as well as managing your agency, and also the whole customer experience insights that you've given us. I think it's a good time now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. And we've got 5 questions for our listener. Actually, the questions are for you, but the answers are for the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result. So You ready?
Okay. I hope so. I hope so. Okay.
What do you think is the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
I think you need to be have a curious mind and be empathetic and curious, and ask curious questions and keep asking. So, why? Ask why 5
Yeah.
times. And then you get to the real answer. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that 5 whys method.
Yeah.
So you mentioned empathy. How do you go about asking 5 whys without coming over as this arrogant sort of know-it-all or petulant 2-year-old?
Oh. No. I think you can do it in a nicer way. You can say, "That's really interesting what you said right now. I'm really fascinated by that. Why is that important?" I think just that is it's an empathetic way of questioning. You just don't go, "Well, why?" You have to frame it in your interest, and that comes back to the curiosity. That you'll when you're listening, you'll hear something that will pique your curiosity and go, "Oh, well, what you said right now about that, why is that important? What would happen if we did that, or what would happen if we didn't do that?" I don't think you have. It's not. Yeah, it's the way that you ask the question. You don't just go, why? Because then they'll think you're like a 3-year-old.
Yeah,
So.
that's right. Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating though, because just trying to think who this was, but this guest that I was speaking to a little while ago had a board of advisors, and one of the rules there was that they had to question things and ask why and have this curiosity that you're talking about. And they actually had a session on the agenda that was called "Think Like a 3-year-old."
Oh wow.
So that kind of gave everyone permission to say, why?
Yeah. I don't get
Yeah.
it. Why? Yeah.
Mm.
I think that's a great idea, because people do censor themselves, particularly in those board type situations. You don't want to feel like you're the only one that doesn't know or he doesn't understand something. So I think that's great. They give them permission to ask why.
Yeah.
Ask the silly question if they have to. Nothing's a silly
That's
question.
right.
So
Only the ones that aren't asked.
exactly. Exactly.
All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I actually think working with a coach has been really beneficial to developing new ideas, and I guess giving myself some confidence in those ideas. I think when you work, for me personally, that's been really helpful, is actually working with a coach and getting another opinion, really, whether that idea is worthwhile, and then validating it with clients as well, is a good one to see whether it does have legs or not.
Yeah. And of course, that's part of the customer insights process, isn't it?
Right, it's absolutely part of that. And any new product development should be the first step, is to go and validate it with the marketplace. Before you start going and developing any code, go and validate it with the marketplace first.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have a favorite resource that you use most often?
For what? Resources? There's resources, lots of different resources.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of HubSpot, so I use a lot of their online training, and I recommend it a lot to people because it's free and incredible. I also read a lot, and I have some favorites who have newsletters, like Anne Handley is number one. She's a tremendous marketer and a great writer and very funny. I've also been reading Scott Galloway, Professor Galloway. He's very funny, but also really switched on. based in the US. He teaches at the NYU Stern School, but also they're pivoting towards online because universities are all shut. And so he's been delivering his MBA insights in a course, $500. Anyone can zoom in and listen to a 4 weeks worth of MBA content. It's like, awesome, I'll do that. He's very much about startups and identifying trillion dollar ideas, which I just think that sounds great. So how do you apply that thinking to your own organization? That's his latest strategy sprint's coming up pretty soon. So I'm constantly learning. So I find it hard to pick one favorite resource because there's lots of favorite resources.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I think the constant learning stuff, and you're right. That's the other thing I think that's come about through because of the pandemic. A lot of people that have programs and teach certain things have been going online, so there's a lot more accessibility to things, and I find it actually a bit intimidating at the moment. I get so many invitations to webinars, and I could be doing 10 or 12 webinars every day. I think I've got to be really selective here, but the option to actually participate in some of that learning now that perhaps wasn't there before is wonderful.
Well, I think it's an interesting transition, particularly for big, expensive university programs. Some of which might not have had great courses, and it's the professors who have, I guess, more of a profile can pivot away from that and build their own brand, really build their own organization, build their own training company that delivers just as good training. I mean, that's why HubSpot's incredible for the level of training that they develop. And even I would hire new grads out of university, and the first thing I would get them to do is go and do the HubSpot training because it just brings them all up to speed on modern marketing techniques that they weren't getting taught at uni. Where does blogging fit into the strategy? SEO, like those really day-to-day fundamental pieces don't seem to be taught at uni. So it's a whole nother discussion, I think.
Yes, I was thinking, do I follow up on that one? Because that's that could be another one.
leave it to some university experts. But I think that it is a sign of the times, and the way universities are headed is towards really specialized, tactical, practical learning that could be done online.
Yeah, that's right. And
you don't get the same uni experience of hanging out on campus and
you miss that,
drink.
You miss that part.
You miss that part of it, but the other bits, the skills are really important.
Okay, well, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Oh, good question. I think regular setting some goals at the beginning that we all agree to, and then regular alignment to those goals. And I'd like to use an agile framework. Although I'm hesitant to say agile because it's not truly the techie agile model. It's more the same 2-week idea. So we have our overall goals, and then we have this is what we're working on the next 2 weeks. It's not officially agile, I guess, but it's a similar framework, and I think it's good for a marketing team to have that discipline in their execution, because they're often pulled in different directions and have different priorities kind of upset what they're working on. And if they can go, no, this is our sprint this week, we can do that in next week or the week after. So it gives them the authority to push back from a marketing team perspective. So yes, I think that's the thing. So if a client says, well, we need to do this, then we go, okay, well, that we could do that, but that means that's going to impact this. Let's have that conversation about which is the most important. Do we drop this and run after that, or do we keep going down this path and then do that later? So
yeah, I like that. I like the kind of the agile framework or a sort of an agile framework in terms of keeping you focused to what the bigger goals are and what the expectations are that you put up
Yeah,
front. Yeah,
exactly.
because we all get bombarded. I mean, everyone gets bombarded by stuff that you get tempted to react to, and all of a sudden the day's gone and you've just reacted to a whole lot of stuff that's got no relationship
Hmm.
to the bigger goals, and so you haven't moved forward. Mm.
Yeah. I think that's also making the time to prioritize the things that are important but not urgent, because oftentimes you just do the important and urgent, but you don't prioritize the really important stuff, but that's not
Yeah.
really urgent right now. And if you don't do that stuff, then you're not going to grow to where you need to be. So,
Yep. So looking at I think it's the Eisenhower matrix, isn't it? The four,
yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, that whole
yeah,
quadrant.
yeah. That's
Yep. Got it.
I love that because it certainly highlights some stuff that and I've got things at the moment that I've put, that can wait. That's not urgent right now, and I've got all this other stuff going on, and then I look at it and say, well, that's really important. It needs to get done.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the tricky thing. And looking even at this company that I'm in right now, they do a lot of important urgent stuff, but they've put off a lot of stuff that was important to do but wasn't so urgent. But now it's becoming really
That's
urgent.
right. At some point it
So
does, doesn't it? Oops, that's
right.
urgent now.
It's like, oh,
I thought I had a lot of time to do that one.
strawberry.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Now, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Oh, number one thing to differentiate themselves. Wow. I think focusing on what you're good at, and not necessarily not being a me too, I think is really the key, and that comes back to really having a good think about what your own goals and objectives are, and what you really love to do, and what you're good at, and then take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, great advice. And I think that's you're kind of living that a little bit in terms of focusing down a little narrow, as you're telling us a bit earlier, in
Yeah,
terms of the.
and it is hard. I mean, I thought for a long time to be a proper agency, I had to have all these things, have an office, and I had to have all these people, and I had to do all this stuff. When you actually really you don't. Who's to say what a proper agency is anyway?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. This has been really great. Now, where can people find out more about your business and what you do, and maybe
Yeah.
even reach out?
Well, connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way, because things keep changing all the time. I am on LinkedIn. I'm Sarah McIntyre. And my website is brightinbound.com.au.
All right. And we'll post links to those on the show notes so people can click straight through.
I have actually got a persona workbook that people might find interesting. I can send you a link to that as well. So if they wanted to start building out their buyer personas and make them actionable and follow the process, I've got a bit of a workbook that people can download and use.
Right.
Put it into process themselves.
Yep. Wonderful. We'll post a link to that in the show notes as well. Thanks.
Sounds good.
All right. Now, do you have a parting bit of advice you'd like to leave our listener today?
Oh, I think you need to. I would encourage everybody to keep learning, be curious, and and be flexible. You never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. Being open to those doors opening is always a good thing.
Yeah. So seeing opportunities where some might see
Adversity.
Yeah, adversity. That's right.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. Now, finally, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Okay. So, I'd like you to chat with Max Trailer. So he's my coach, and he is based in Boston, and he also has a podcast which is called Beers with Max.
Oh, beers.
And beers with Max. So you can have a beer with Max,
Mm-hmm.
and he's all about productising agencies because he's been in the agency world for a while, and realised it's becoming a commodity in many cases, and agencies are going out of business. So what's the next step from here?
Okay, great. Well, we'll get an introduction from you to Max. I'll have to have a listen to his podcast, and we'll get him on to chat with us.
Had some really fascinating guests, actually. There was another guy called Steve Lashansky who was on it, who is a really high-powered executive coach about aligning organizational objectives. That was really good. Just very low key, but also very very important advice as well.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, Sarah. Really appreciate you spending your time and your insights with us today so generously on the InnovaBuzz podcast. We managed to get through without any soaring or hammering, but we did have an ambulance siren at one point.
I know, there was an ambulance.
I guess that's the time we're living in. So hopefully that will turn out well. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
Okay. That's great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and informative conversation with Sarah and took something away from her episode. My highlights from this episode are Sarah's intense customer focus and how to turn those customer insights into an actionable marketing and delivery plan. I'd love to know what you took away from Sarah's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Sarah McIntyre. That is SarahMcIntyre. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Sarah McIntyre. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Sarah there, as well as links to the Bright Inbound website, her LinkedIn profile, and the other resources we spoke about in the conversation today. Sarah suggested that we have a conversation with Max Traylor, who helps agencies productize consulting services and hosts the Beers with Max podcast on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So Max, grab a beer and keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Sarah McIntyre. Tune in again next week to the InnovaBuzz podcast. We've got some more fantastic guests lined up, including Systems Rock founder Natasha Vorompiova and the author of The Attention Factor, Alice Aspen March. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.